If you thought the realignment wheel had stopped spinning, you are sadly mistaken. After Texas State leaves the Sun Belt to join the Pac-12, which was widely speculated and even expected for the most part, because kudos to the Bobcats, they handled their business like you should. They were upfront and honest with the Sun Belt. Hey, we're talking to the Pac-12. We got an offer from the Pac-12. We're going to take the Pac-12 offer. That's how it should be done. Now, there's a spot open in the Sun Belt, and it certainly appears as if there is some disagreement on who should fill it. And maybe there are a couple of different options for the Sun Belt to consider overall. They're now at 13 schools. They have gone all in on divisions. They are the only conference still in college football that has divisions. So, and it works for the Sun Belt, so don't expect them to change that really anytime soon. With the exit of Texas State, that leaves open a position in the Western Division. Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana, Southern Miss, Arkansas State, for the most part, would like to see that filled by Louisiana Tech. There are some that believe Louisiana Tech is not a shoo-in to join the Sun Belt because the Eastern schools don't believe Louisiana Tech adds anything. There are other reports that Louisiana Monroe has gone as far to say, if you don't add Louisiana Tech, we are going to be forced to drop to the FCS level. Now, that certainly sounds like a rumor that Louisiana Monroe has their bleep together, for lack of a better term. They got a new president who's essentially saying we are committed to being a Division I FBS program, despite having the smallest athletic budget in all of FBS, that they are committed to being in the FBS division. Now, you could argue whether that is Louisiana Monroe trying to throw their weight around, which I don't know that Louisiana Monroe has a ton of weight to throw around, to tell you the truth, in the Sun Belt. But there was a report that came out on Wednesday night that the Ohio Bobcats have reached out to the Sun Belt Conference to say, hey, would love to start this conversation if you guys are interested in this conversation. Now, that's an interesting school to kind of pop out of the woodwork, because the other candidates thus far widely floated have been the likes of Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, East Carolina, all schools who are relatively already in the Sun Belt Conference footprint. I know that Kentucky and Tennessee are not in the Sun Belt Conference footprint. I know that. But if you draw a line from James Madison and Marshall to Arkansas State around the conference, that circle includes the states of Kentucky, Tennessee. Ohio's not included in that area. The Ohio Bobcats are about 80 miles north of where Marshall is in West Virginia, and have had a natural rivalry with the Thundering Herd for a long time. That would reunite Ohio and Marshall. Now, Ohio is, as you know, a member of the Mid-American Conference, which is as tight geographically, like-minded institutions, all state schools, but it's not as tight as it once was. Northern Illinois is leaving to take their football to the Mountain West, which I'm on the record. I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea. But they're adding UMass as a full member, which probably on the record is like, I don't think that's a great idea. So Ohio is now kicking around its options, because the MAC and the Sun Belt have relatively similar TV deals with ESPN. That's likely to change in the next couple of years, because the Sun Belt has positioned itself to, depending on the year, either the best or second best conference in the group of five on the football field. And it certainly seems like Ohio would be interested in playing in a much better conference overall than the MAC, which is, depending on the year, either the worst or second worst conference in FBS now, after having a run where the MAC was at times the top dog in the quote-unquote mid-majors. There were a lot of reactions to this, some from Ohio fans saying, like, hey, what the hell are we doing? We're the charter member of the MAC still existing in the conference. Of the 12, 13, 14 schools, 13 schools once Northern Illinois leaves, a nice big chunk of them are in the state of Ohio. We can bus to damn near every game, and if you go to the Sun Belt, that's not the case. And I'm an on-the-record believer of, like, everything else can change. Everything else can migrate and evolve in college football to where I don't care that Cal and Stanford and SMU are in the Atlantic Coast Conference, or that Texas and Oklahoma are in the Southeastern, Texas A&M and Oklahoma are in the Southeastern Conference. I don't care about that. I don't care that a school in Boise, Idaho is going to be in the Pacific 12. I don't care about the regional names of conferences and who is in those conferences. I don't care that the state of Ohio is not viewed as a Sun Belt state. I don't care about that. And I don't think schools care about that anymore. They care about TV money. And there's a really decent chance that the TV money that's already somewhat paltry for the Mid-American Conference dries up a little bit when their deal is up in a couple of years. The Sun Belt's deal isn't up until 2031. And when that deal is up, if they have committed to being really, really great on the football field, there's a chance that that money goes up. Because when you have the likes of programs who have some football history, James Madison, Appalachian State, Georgia Southern have a litany of FCS national championships, as does Marshall. Marshall has been a really good football program at times, as has James Madison. Coastal Carolina has been pretty good at times. There's a lot to like about the Sun Belt. And it's really not as horrible as I think a lot of people might think. You can get from Athens, Ohio to Boone, North Carolina in 5 hours. Probably quicker. You can get to Harrisonburg, Virginia, where James Madison is, in 5 hours. You can get from Ohio to Marshall in an hour and a half. It's not that outlandish. And I know that this is a difficult thing to grasp, because I think there are a lot of people who view loyalty as a really strong quality, that it's a really important quality. You should be loyal to those who have been loyal to you. But as I've mentioned before a couple of different times in the last couple of weeks, we now are in a dog-eat-dog world. Conferences are constantly evolving, and they are gobbling up who they can, when they can, because they can. And that's the only reason why. So does Ohio make a ton of sense to stay in the Mid-American Conference? Yes, absolutely. But if the MAC is going to sit and stand pat and just watch the world and their house crumble around them as they lose Northern Illinois, there are somewhat rumors that Buffalo and Toledo could be interested in joining the American Athletic Conference. If you're not going to add for the sake of addition, and I know that feels backwards. I know that in the late 90s, the WAC got too big, got fractured, and it broke everybody apart, and now the WAC still, I think, is on resurrection attempt like number 4 and still hasn't got it done yet. I know that feels counterintuitive to just make your conference kind of as big as possible, but it's a game of survival at this point. And if you're going to commit to playing at the FBS level, which I think for a lot of schools in the MAC is going to be a decision to be made over the next decade or so. Do we want to try to play big boy football, or do we want to be universities that happen to have football teams that might be competitive on the FCS level? I think there are schools, Kent State, Akron, who are going to have to make those determinations over the course of the next decade. It sounds like Ohio is saying, hey, we're making our determination. This is what we want to be. We want to be an FBS school. And if we have to, we'll jump to the Sun Belt to stay a competitive football program at the top level that we can attain to do that. And I think that's somewhat admirable. Does it, on the surface, look kind of crappy that you're going to leave teams and schools that you have decades and decades of history behind? Yeah, if you've got to make that decision. But you can look at it from kind of two ways. You can look at it as Ohio is legitimately interested in joining the Sun Belt. And I think the Sun Belt should be legitimately interested in Ohio. It opens up a lot of doors that they probably don't even know or consider or think of right now. Rather than Louisiana Tech, potentially Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, East Carolina, which I understand like East Carolina would be the pipe dream, but if you can get it, go for it. So it's either Ohio's legitimately interested in the Sun Belt Conference, or it's kind of a shot across the bow to the MAC conference office and the other members of the MAC of, if you guys want to sit here, stand pat, nobody wants to change, nobody wants to evolve, we're going to be forced to leave. Because we can't sit here, watch the house be caught on fire, and then go be the meme. This is fine. Because you just can't afford to do that. You can't afford to stand pat in college football in 2025. It's just not an option. And so I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Now, the report that came out said maybe that's not Ohio making overtures for now, but somewhere down the line. Because adding Ohio right now, if that's going to be just the 14th school in the Sun Belt, is not ideal. Because you would have to probably split the Georgia schools in the Sun Belt, Georgia State, Georgia Southern, into separate divisions. If the Sun Belt is committed to divisions, which I think if you're adding a school like Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, Western Kentucky, East Carolina, Louisiana Tech, whatever the case may be, that's kind of the natural still thing. Those schools are going to want regional competition rather than Ohio now playing games against Arkansas State, Louisiana, etc. It's not ideal. So playing the divisions still works, but you'd have some problems. So the options are you add one school, get back to 14. Conceivably, that school would need to be in the western portion of the Sun Belt to replace Texas State. So your Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee State would fit that bill. They could go to 16 schools. They could add 3 schools and then figure out how you get still either Georgia Southern, Georgia State, or Troy and South Alabama still in the same division of the conference. Or they stand pat at 13 and figure it the bleep out. Those are kind of the options right now. So I'm interested to see how this plays out. But I told you a few weeks ago, Texas State holds all the cards. If they stood pat, nothing changed, and the Pac-12 had to figure something out. They didn't. They jumped to the Pac-12. And now it's going to lead to either Conference USA or now potentially the MAC having to figure out what they are going to do next. And so I don't want to just quite yet, because I feel like it's probably jumping the gun, but potentially the Texas State Bobcats have passed their cards of holding all the cards in the realignment mumbo jumbo to the Ohio Bobcats. I'm stopping just short of the Ohio Bobcats hold all of the cards in the college football's next realignment cycle, but there's a really good chance that the Ohio Bobcats hold all of the cards in the next college football realignment cycle. I want to know your thoughts. Who do you want to see fill that spot in the Sun Belt? Should it be a Conference USA member? Should it be a member from the MAC? Should it be a member for the FCS? Should they stand pat? Want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. I appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you're listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.